Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Your host, as always, Jonny Torres. Thank you so much for joining us. We're coming to you on this short week because last week we did our show on Wednesdays. So it's been a short week, but we're glad to be back with you here from the Bullhorn Communications Bunker in beautiful Ybor City, Florida, the heart, the roots, the foundation of Tampa Bay. And we've got lots to talk about and a little more emphasis, like I said, on kind of where we're coming from because today this show is going to be very Florida heavy. And so got some fresh faces on the show for you today. Some we haven't seen in a while, some we haven't had on the show before, and I'm excited about both of those. And the other one, So first, let's go into today's topics. Like I said, we're going to be Florida heavy in terms of topics today. So we're going to talk about the Governor DeSantis with our first two topics. Of course, he is touting his big tech bill to prevent censorship, to prevent using these powerful social media platforms against conservatives and Republicans politically throughout the state of Florida. We'll pick that apart in addition to unemployment running out. That's it. Time's up. Time to get back to work, everybody. How that's going to impact the Florida economy and of course, the lack of labor that we're seeing throughout the state. Also, we are going to talk about the one and only, the original orange man here in Florida politics, Charlie Crist, whose Pride Parade did not end too well. And we'll pick apart, of course, Charlie's presence in Ybor City over the weekend. And last but not least, we have our financial expert who's joining us on the show once again. And so we're going to get into none other than crypto and Rollercoaster crypto, nonetheless, which will inevitably lead to one of my favorite topics, which is Elon Musk. And so let's get the show started. Let's go over to the big table now. Right over here to my left, we've got Dalton Grados. Welcome back, my friend.
How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for coming back. You are now the appointed financial expert of the Yard Sign.
Yes, I appreciate it.
And obviously outside of crypto, there's just so much to talk about what's happening economically because I think because of COVID, we're seeing some very, very unique circumstances in terms of what's happening economically, not only at a national level, but even at a global level. Mm-hmm. Next to Dalton Grados, this would be my good friend, Berny Jaques, who we haven't had on the show before, but, it's great to finally get you on. Long-time Republican, with the Young Republicans, and you've run for State House. You're running for State House. You're also doing amazing work with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for having me on, and thank you for having a Pinellas guy across the bay here.
It took a lot of negotiations to make that happen.
We know it's not easy to cross the bridge.
It's not easy to cross that bridge, but I did. It ain't
Although I heard we lost one over here to the bridge.
I'm in Pinellas too. So.
Got lured in by that Pinellas nightlife.
Yeah.
Which is not something I thought we would ever say when I first moved here in 2006. Okay, when really, it was sleepier than like Scarface era South Beach, with retirement homes and old folks and all that stuff. Now St. Petersburg is just like a completely different city.
Oh my gosh! Even in 2009, when I first moved to the area, first year of law school, all the cool kids would hang out in South Tampa.
Right.
Well, they still do. But
I don't know all about that. There's a lot happening in Pinellas. Y'all should come over and enjoy.
Yeah.
It's
there unbelievable.
Well, I try not to post much that I'm crossing the bridge because I don't like people knowing that I actually do that. However, every once in a while I will cross the bridge for a good meal or some sand.
No, look, despite my criticism of the new pier, or initially the building of the new pier, not the pier itself. The new pier is actually pretty amazing, and it's great for the entire family, which I love. It has a lot of things that the previous pier did not really offer in terms of activities and things for kids and families with kids. Now I think it really kind of touches all bases, and it's quite a monument. Obviously not perfect. It has its issues, and but nonetheless, I mean, it's really kind of been the cherry on top to what started originally with Mayor Rick Baker in redeveloping downtown into just the amazing place it is now with museums and restaurants and nightlife. It's a whole new city.
Absolutely. I mean, the city is the beneficiary of initially Republican policies. First
Right.
under Rick Baker, followed through by Mayor Foster. As a fiscal conservative, I always get a little heartburn about the price tag with some of these projects. But it truly is a state-of-the-art pier, and I encourage people to check it out.
Well, and I was fortunate enough to actually talk to Mayor Baker recently, and now he's doing kind of the same thing over in Winter Haven. He's working with a group over there who's trying to revitalize Winter Haven. And Winter Haven, I mean, really, most people don't know, is maybe one of the most beautiful parts of Florida, especially being there, among all the lakes, in Lakeland and Polk County. So we'll see. I think he's found a recipe that works. And certainly we continue to see the fruits of that as to the point where now, like, honestly, I say this all the time, and no disrespect to the Rays, but I don't truly think St. Petersburg really cares about baseball anymore, sadly, but I think their priorities and their vision is elsewhere.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, there are a lot of people who care about the Rays, and certainly I'm a baseball fan, so I would rather the Rays be there. But to your point, the city is booming at such a level that if the Rays were to move, I think the city wouldn't miss a beat economically because there's so much that they can do with that land to redevelop it. And I think a lot of people are, quite frankly, licking their chops as to what they can do with that site. And so either way, they stay, which I would be very happy about, or they go, I think there's going to be a lot of development in that area because of the growth that we're seeing with St. Petersburg.
And you actually saw the article came out recently that there's been development that the owners of the Rays were talking to the developers in Canada about 4 years ago, before this even had a conversation about doing a dual city. So I don't think they're making a big enough push to want to stay. I'm a baseball guy, Dominican, so it's already it's in my blood, and I would be upset that they would move. But honestly, I think maybe even basketball might be a better fit for the region now that's growing up a little bit more, a lot more younger.
Well, Tampa seems to be more sports centric, and with again, you got the Lightning, you've got the Bucks, and then of course now we got the Tampa Raptors, who will hopefully stick around for maybe another season, but to that token. Whereas in contrast, St. Petersburg has become more of a cultural hub with the restaurants and the museums, and the art scene is unbelievable there. The glass art scene, especially. Shout out to the Imagine Museum.
Music, Dalton and I were talking about earlier. You can just walk around downtown and check out all these.
That's one thing I love the most. I'm a musician myself, but I mean, I just go walk around. And now I've started to recognize a lot of the different live bands that play pretty regularly.
Sure.
But I just go on walks down Central, and I'll run by 5 or 6 different music acts.
Wow.
And they have 7 nights a week. It's a great place for entertainment, arts. A night out, all the restaurants and things.
Well, and that's not even talking about the Mahaffey. The Mahaffey Theater, not even taking the Mahaffey into consideration, you've got Janice Live, and then you've got great bars, who, again, are really kind of putting a focus on local music. I mean, so.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the above. I was actually at the Mahaffey this Saturday. It's home to the Florida Orchestra.
Right.
And so got to see them play there. But I mean, just local acts at the restaurants and bars. I mean, either way, you're going to get a good music scene over in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
I really don't care about the city, honestly. So I am just waiting for the mayor to annex the rest of the county.
Oh my God.
My billion, and I'll say $1 billion idea, I think, for St. Petersburg to do with that property that the Rays. Thank you, sir. If you could turn off all phones.
I did.
Would actually be to create a world-class, state-of-the-art convention center that this region does not have. I mean, the Tampa Convention Center is great, does the job, but there are a lot of larger shows and there are a lot of larger conventions that we can't attract because we don't have the capacity. I don't think this region will ever see a convention center like what's in Orlando. I mean, that one's, globally among one of the largest. But right, exactly. I mean, you have the infrastructure there in terms of transportation and hotels and all this stuff to support it, which Pinellas also has. Pinellas has a lot of hotel infrastructure, a lot of tourism infrastructure that could benefit from become a world-class convention center.
In addition to that, we have the beaches, right? So
Right.
world-class beaches in Pinellas County, and so if that can be part of the attraction of luring
Yeah.
people down, that you can enjoy, part of the day at the beach while doing whatever you're doing at the convention center, I think that could be a big draw to our tourism. And in the district I'm running for, District 66, some of the best beaches when you talk about Indian Shores, Indian Rocks,
Right.
Clearwater Beach, and so a lot of great destinations for sure.
Yeah.
That could serve as a launching point from the convention center to these great beaches.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our first topic of the day, which is the tech bill. Okay, and anyone who knows me, and certainly in producing this show, this has been my space for almost 20 years now, which is crazy to even say that. And it's heartbreaking because, as they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And unfortunately, what we've seen is the leveraging of these platforms now in a way that this isn't only happening in the United States. All right. Yeah. This is happening at a global level where we are seeing these platforms basically decide who they want to have in charge politically, and manipulating the advertising, manipulating, the people's psychology to swing and have an influence on these elections. And so Florida, again, kind of leading the way with this big tech bill. And, even bringing it down to the local level. We know Anna Luna, who ran for Congress in the last cycle, had an issue with Twitter, and them, I think, at certain points suspending her account, not verifying her account, as a congressional candidate. It's. I mean, do you think it's one of these things that is this really going to be able to have legs, though? Whether it's the Florida Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court, because I think it's only a matter of time before other states follow suit. But again, it's kind of hard to prove when a lot of these legislators, certainly in Congress, much less here in Florida, even understand the type of technology that they're up against.
Yeah, it's certainly an issue that needs to be addressed. And once again, Florida, under the leadership of Ron DeSantis, is leading the way. And we will see, right, as far as what the court challenges say. I anticipate there will be challenges, but enough is enough. I mean, to your point, you had the situation with Anna Luna, who is, she has so many followers. Yeah. And for a person like that to not receive her blue check mark, even if he wasn't a candidate, to me, it's astounding. And then she becomes a qualified candidate, and Twitter doesn't want to verify her account. How is that not stacking the deck against one candidate over another?
Right.
And so the left loves to talk about election interference, but big tech does it all the time, not only at the local level, but then you talk about even the presidential level, to censor everything the president of the United States, who's an active candidate, is saying, burying stories like the Hunter Biden thing,
right?
And these are in-kind contributions to the Democrats,
right?
that these big tech
that are worth billions.
Well, and this is where I think they cross the line between being a platform and being a publisher, right? Because they've always tried to hide behind the excuse that, well, we are a platform, we are not publishers. But again, when you are dictating, when you are curating the content that goes in front of the people that are using your platform, I think at that point you are a publisher.
Totally.
The New York Times doesn't print everything that people want to see. They pick and choose what they want to put in front of their readers, exactly the way that Twitter does, exactly the way that Facebook does. And I know some great people that work at these companies, but these platforms are being used maliciously. And so when we're talking about not even the obvious stuff like, what happened to Luna, but we're talking about even the shadow banning, and the manipulation of algorithms so that certain people get less visibility than others. Again, there are things that they know they can get away with because they realize that the legislation and certainly the legislators are not up to speed on how all this technology works.
It's just it's going to take more of this happening so that we are able to get the momentum to the courts. That's what this all takes. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes other states and other communities and groups putting themselves in the position to actually get these bills passed so that puts enough pressure in the federal courts so that we're actually allowed to get rid of the section, why am I thinking section 51? It's not that one. But the section that allows for these tech companies to not have to be able to play the same ball when it comes to newspapers. So it just takes time. I think it builds a precedence. And as long as you keep on building that, then more and more people will fall in line.
Yeah, and that's how cases originate, right? There has to be a case or controversy for the courts to take it up, and so this kicks it off. So you have something to point to, to litigate these matters. But at the federal level, you've had some great leaders like Senator Josh Hawley out of Missouri, who I'm a huge fan of, has been taking on big tech and trying to strip away their basically immunity, and as they act as publishers,
right.
But get to reap the benefits of not. And that's a problem.
Well, let me create kind of an opening here for our financial expert, because we've even seen now, even in the financial space, where certain entities are now dictating where you can and can't invest your money, and like if you are contributing to certain organizations, how they're not validating those transactions. I mean, we saw conservative groups, in this last election cycle, have their accounts removed, have their accounts taken down, where they're not able to fundraise, or their bank accounts frozen. I mean, what are you kind of seeing in the financial space?
I actually didn't know that. That's pretty alarming, right? I mean, having your actual accounts frozen because of who you're contributing to.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about some of these guys like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder, and obviously, maybe the worst example being Alex Jones. But you saw financial entities, PayPal and some of these other banks, saying, okay, well, we're going to cut off their accounts, and we're going to cut off anybody giving money to these entities. Again, whether it's Alex Jones, again, maybe a terrible person, okay, in terms of some of the things he's done and said, okay, or again, it could be somebody as harmless as a Ben Shapiro, because he really is, as outspoken as he is. But again, they're literally manipulating now how people spend their money.
Well, yeah, and then you have basically now, so you have somebody, the head of these organizations in Silicon Valley, deciding what organizations are the right organizations, and then it goes into what beliefs are the right beliefs. And so you have, and even in that movie or the documentary, The Social Dilemma, where he's talking about you have these people in Silicon Valley that are basically deciding the thoughts of the entire world, and and so when it comes to censorship and things like that, they're basically getting to decide what is the right thing to share, and what is the thing that gets censored. And so I mean, you see as a Republican libertarian mindset, you see both sides of it. Right. You see on one side it's private companies, like you mentioned in the beginning. Every private company should be able to do what they want, and then if they don't like it, then capitalism can take care of it, and you have another company open. And then on the flip side of the coin, when you have an organization or several organizations that are so large that are now influencing the world, and you have people dying in Myanmar and things like that over certain things that were started on social networks.
Well, I think once I mean, and I know the way that we typically use public company versus a private company and that sort of thing, and we'd like to say, okay, well, PayPal's a private company. Well, it's not. It's a publicly traded company, right? Yeah. And they're subject to regulations by the SEC. And I think we should use those same guidelines in dictating what they can and can't do politically. Because again, we're seeing that that there are entities out there that will not allow you to fundraise for conservative or Republican organizations.
And the key to a free market, coming from that side, because I hear a lot from people on the right who say, well, there's this private business, don't interfere. But the underpinning of a free market system is an environment that allows there to be competition. Right. And in essence, a lot of these big tech companies are acting as full-on monopolies over that space. And certainly that's not conducive to a true free market. And Republicans were the leaders in the early 20th century to go and bust these monopolies, trust busting. Right? And so because we knew it was unfair, it was not conducive to a free market system. And so that's what we need to get back to and make sure that we rein in these companies who are basically acting as rulers, unelected unaccountable rulers over American society, no company should have all that power.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I mean, think about it. If they're able to have the impact that they've had on a country like the United States, imagine the impact they've had on these smaller countries, that don't have the knowledge, the resources to go up against a Google or to go up against a Facebook, where they have legitimately censored and blocked and deplatformed candidates simply because they don't agree with their political policies. Right. I mean, again, like these candidates or not, again, like they should just stay out of the fray entirely and serve as the platform as they intended to be.
At the end of the day, I think we need to get back to the idea of busting up trust. We did that with big oil. We did that with rail system. We've done that in the past many times over. The fact that Google has been allowed to get away with operating as Alphabet is very troublesome. I think that needs to be broken up immediately. I think what's happening with Amazon buying publishing companies and then having their opinions be pushed, even if they say it's not true, we know it's true. It's happening.
Yeah.
A phone call is being had somewhere.
Right.
And so because of that and the transparency that's not happening, you need to bust them up. Now, who will be the people to do that? I thought Trump was going to be that person, and I think he was moving in that direction.
Yeah.
But if he couldn't even get our troops out of Afghanistan, I don't think he was going to do the
Well,
busting.
it's such a tricky territory, right, to go after because, again, as we saw, the minute you get on the wrong side of these companies, they start to leverage their power against you. And again, maybe that may very well have been why they started to do it, because they knew that he was going to come after them if he was to be given another term. To bring it back to here in Florida, again, I think, especially given how divided Congress is, how little of any sort of actual significance gets done in Congress, I think we're going to see more states adapting a legislation like what Governor DeSantis is passing in this big tech bill, because I don't see anything like that coming from Congress anytime soon. I just don't think they have the willpower to do it.
Right, it's going to have to come from the states, especially under this Biden era, under this Pelosi-Schumer era. You can't count on it. And quite frankly, you can't count on it from some of these establishment Republicans.
Correct.
It's
Very much true.
Right. It took some of these outsiders like the Hawleys or President Trump, to kind of shake up the system, who weren't, deeply, entrenched in the ways of Washington.
Well, and again, they're more scared about the retaliation from these tech companies and not getting the tech company money.
Right.
Right, because they're doling out checks too.
Big part of it.
And look, I mean, as much as we'd like to say, oh well, Google is liberal and Facebook's liberal and all that stuff, the truth of the matter is they put money on both sides of the aisle.
They're cutting checks both ways.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And and I learned that doing the Republican National Convention. Again, they came in and they gave us a lot of resources and free equipment and we basically anything that we asked for under the sun, they were willing to give us. But guess what? They're doing the same thing to the other side. They're certainly hedging their bets. But again, I'm sure that if you were to come after them and say, we are going to come in, it's time for you to go and break up this conglomerate that you've built, I don't see why what would stop them from leveraging that very platform against these individuals who are trying to break them up.
The last time we had a president that had the balls, honestly, to do something like that was Teddy Roosevelt, when he went after the Rockefellers and the Chases and the Mellons, and those were the banking world at the time.
Right.
And so you would need something as strong as that. Does that look like a DeSantis presidency? Does that look like someone else? I don't know. We need to get through 2022 first.
Well, so far, I mean, if you think about it, DeSantis is kind of Roosevelt-esque, in that
very
sense.
pro-environment, right?
Right.
Yeah. Conservationist. He's taking on the powers that be, and certainly is a populist in nature.
Military guy,
Right. Right. I mean, there's so many comparisons. There should be an article about that.
That is it. Yeah.
Are there books about that? Maybe.
I don't know.
So the comment section is blowing up now that we touched the economy and capitalism.
Oh, really?
But Fred let us know about the Great Reset, which is definitely something that they've been talking about in the press. Hector is saying when there's a monopoly of the press, there's a problem. I completely agree with that. Yeah. Other comments are talking about that that's Fred. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Well, really quick, because the monopoly of the press, unfortunately, is a problem that is not being exacerbated by themselves. It's actually being exacerbated by the rise of technology and the access to information. You don't see the Tampa Bay Times or the New York Times, for that matter, getting larger or more influential by choice. Obviously, they want to be, but it's actually more because of the free market. And what's happening is that their competition is dying. And so the more of that their competition dies off, the more influential they become because they're the remaining few.
Right.
And we're starting to see, again, this consolidation where the buying of the Washington Post, by Amazon. And so this consolidation is actually, it's kind of a weird thing. I don't think we've ever, because these monopolies are not being created by the entities themselves, but by market forces.
Right.
Well, so with normal monopolies, it's because it's a product that everyone has, and they're grabbing that corner so that everyone has to work with that one person. Google, 90-something% of searches. Big oil at the time, almost 100% of that. Big steel, big tech. And so now when we see, but with publishing, it is the reduction of the staff. It's the reduction of that local location that would do all the reporting because they just have to go to Washington or New York and be able to be the big switch connector. So I think that's what's happening in there, and it's much more difficult to deal with.
Well, not to mention that
there's
now
not really a press monopoly, and I agree where you're coming from when you mentioned that in the comments, but it's not the normal monopoly. I don't know how you.
Well,
can
that's
break
what I'm
that up.
saying. Yeah, it's a monopoly by market forces, not by growth.
Correct.
And so what we're seeing too is that because of the polarization of the media, to where now there's left and right entities. Now we're seeing, again, certain media outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and even some of these newspapers be bolder and more assured of themselves in their right-leaning or left-leaning, in their case, policies, to where, the mayor of Chicago can come out and say, well, that she's only going to do interviews with black and brown reporters and not get any kind of flack for it.
How is she still in power? I don't understand how she's still in office.
Yeah, well.
If anyone that was not our color, Dalton, were to say that, everyone would have lost their mind.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that reverse cycle.
Not even
reverse
that.
racism.
Even if Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, being Hispanic or brown, as they say, were to come out and say something like that, like they would still. I mean, forget it. It would be a headline for the next 2 weeks.
Listen,
Because
it's a straight up racist policy.
Correct.
Full stop.
Yeah,
To say I'm only going to grant interviews based on the color of your skin. But because it happens to be people of color, the mainstream media looks the other way and they don't bat an eye. I mean, the reverse, all hell would be breaking loose. There'd be riots on the streets.
Well, and look, and to be fair,
in Chicago, there are already riots on the streets.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, and to be fair, unfortunately, you have your Caucasian reporters and even leaders among these media outlets who can't say anything and can't push back against something like that because they know that they're on the chopping block,
Right.
But
they know that their positions are being scrutinized. And I know for a fact, even here at the local level, reporters that have been passed up for positions and promotions because they want to bring in a person of color to meet whatever diversification goals they're trying to meet. Instead of just giving it to the guy who's been in there and been putting in the work.
But do you know how you stop that? And it happened during the Trump administration when Trump didn't want to talk to CNN and he only wanted to talk to Fox, was that the rest of the press pool decided not to take interviews at all. It's because Trump said no to one, he said no to all.
Right.
I would encourage the reporters that are brown, black, and yellow, and Asian descent to also limit their access to the mayor of Chicago, because that's the only way you stop something like this. It is inappropriate to just focus on someone's skin color for access. That's inappropriate. You don't like that there's more white people in the room? Well, then the way you fix it is that you put more money into education and more money into those internships, into those communities. That's how you fix it. But being blatantly racist to someone because of their skin color does nothing to help it. It just makes it worse. And I know of brown reporters in Chicago that have asked the mayor, can we please have more access with our fellow people that are not brown? And when she says no, they get up and they leave. That's how you do it. You make it uncomfortable because it's a reverse racism. That's literally what MLK
Well, it's
Jr.
not
said.
reverse racism. There's no such thing as reverse racism.
But
it is just racism.
We're using dialect for progressives to
Oh,
understand these words.
Using their vocabulary.
Let's understand all of this.
Okay.
I don't agree, but we got to use the words. Jonathan, who is a he, her. What would be your
He, him,
he, him,
his.
Bro,
him,
bruh.
his, they,
Yeah, bruh.
bruh.
All right.
I am
Yeah.
a jellyfish, so please identify as that with the pearls.
Oh my gosh! All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and transition again to the. On that note, I would say the second biggest bit of news coming out of the DeSantis office, which is the kind of rollback of the state unemployment. That's been going out over this COVID crisis. I believe it's around $300, has been added on. Of course, there's been controversy over a system that has actually, unfortunately, to be perfectly honest, broken since the Scott administration, in terms of the DEO and the unemployment website and that sort of thing. But again, hopefully that's something that the governor will work on and have fixed during his administration. But I think we're starting to see this across the country. Certainly, Americans for Prosperity, for instance, had a congresswoman on today talking about how they're going to present legislation to kind of roll back, this unemployment situation because of the labor shortages that it's causing across the country. I mean, I think all of us have kind of faced some of these side effects, whether it's at a restaurant, whether it's at some other business. Certainly the hospitality industry, being the lifeblood of Florida's economy, has really suffered from this the worst.
Even ride sharing as well. I mean,
Sure.
the waits for Uber are much longer and
Right.
more surging because there's a shortage of drivers who are, it's more profitable to
Yeah.
take that extra $300.
Which honestly, there really hadn't been like a lot of surging and stuff in the Uber, and I speak from experience. When it first, before it was quote unquote legal, when it was kind of in that gray space, I was doing a bit of Uber driving myself, and there was all these surges, and it was great. You can make great money like in just a weekend. You could make anywhere from $300 to $500. If you just in one night. But once it became legal and everybody got on the platform,
Right.
then that started to be, harder and harder to do. So I don't use Uber that much, but I'm not surprised that it's even affecting, stuff again, like these kind of, what do they call it? The gig economy.
Right.
Because again, if you don't need that extra money, then why are you going to go out there and put yourself out there if you don't need to?
Also, it's causing inflation. I think a lot of people don't understand. The more money that's in the system requires an increase of prices, because now business owners and those that are charging rent for homes know that you have excess income, so they're going to charge more money for that. You're going to see prices continue to increase. And that doesn't affect the middle and upper classes as much. That affects the lower income brackets. And again, a Democratic group you would think the Democrats would be thinking about the lower classes, when really they're just focused on themselves and what makes it pop. So like a $20 an hour, $50 an hour, that doesn't help a 16-year-old trying to get a job at Publix. That doesn't help someone that's just looking for like side hustle work. That hurts those people, and that's a really big part of the population, and people that don't want to work full time. Well, now you have to force everyone to work full time so they all get benefits. They're not going to find jobs.
Yeah.
Who cares?
It's almost like anytime the government tries to help people, and it's the government trying to help a certain group of people, it ends up hurting the very group of people they try to help the most. But as far as DeSantis, removing the extra unemployment benefit from the state level, it just makes sense, especially in the state of Florida, where we're the most open of any other state. And there's so many places that are looking for workers. I mean,
exactly.
I know plenty of business owners and coffee shop owners and people that are like, I need employees.
Well,
like,
the downside to this is that there's a lot of people out there who are, shout out to Pinellas' own Kawa Coffee. But we're even seeing instances where there are people who are simply applying for these jobs and either A, not showing up for the interviews, or B, going to the interviews and saying, look, I'm not really interested in the job. I'm just trying to meet the requirements for the unemployment, which is, again, that is also a net loss for these businesses, because that's time away from the business that they
Yeah.
could be focusing on customers and focusing on.
It's frustrating. I hear from
Yeah.
business owners all the time on the campaign trail. People are filling out applications with no intentions of showing up to the interviews, setting up interviews, and there are no shows, or even just showing up one day and then not showing up the next,
Right.
just to say, hey, I was looking. And so, rolling this back to your point, Dalton, especially in Florida where we're open, we've been open for a while.
Yeah.
And I love
Yeah.
the shirt,
The shirt.
Open
There you
since-
go.
Florida open since the whole time.
Let the camera find it. Let the camera find
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
there.
is a situation where in Florida it's not needed. I can understand if you're in a lockdown blue state where you're under the oppression of one of these Democrat mayors and governors, where through no fault of your own, you need the assistance,
Right.
but not in Florida.
Yeah.
We've been open. There are jobs available. I think the figure was that over 400,000. The head of the Department of Economic Opportunity in Florida said of job, maybe over 600,000 of jobs that are available right now in the state of Florida. Shout out to a great restaurant in Pinellas, Slice Pizza, where I had my first campaign event. Great establishment.
Yeah.
They opened up a new location in St. Pete Beach. It's open. It's ready to go. The ribbon's been cut, but they can't open it because they can't find the employees.
Wow.
That investment's just sitting there.
Wow.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And then to
go
like
ahead.
what Anibal was saying about inflation earlier, it's like, you have certain places, like bigger companies, a lot of times like Wawa, McDonald's, I believe, raising their wages. So people are like, oh, finally they're paying the wage, 15, even I think McDonald's was $18 an hour in some states. But those are always passed along to the customer.
Yeah.
I was watching a podcast with the CEO of, what's that chicken place from Texas? Cane's, Raising Cane's. And it was an interesting podcast, but he was saying in that business, fast food, you are doing good if you make 10 cents on the dollar
Correct.
profit.
Right.
And so any margin cuts or anything, anytime you raise the wages or anytime chicken gets more expensive or whatever, it's always, you gotta pass it on to the customer.
Well, look, I mean,
And so,
to give some credit to the left's talking points, and again, but this goes to, again, each company making its own decisions. Are some of these CEO salaries absolutely absurd, and some of their packages and their golden parachutes and all this stuff? Absolutely. But that's the company's decision to structure those compensation plans, right? Because again, the people that are getting hurt aren't the CEOs and the executives at the top end. It's the employees at the lower level, the local management, and the local consumer who is going to be getting the price increases. Especially when, if you know anything about McDonald's, nationally, the corporate entity will kind of put pressure on these local franchises to adopt new products and new machines, and which again impact the local revenue, and it's not sustainable. I mean, the one thing that I'm shocked nobody has talked about has actually been the disappearance of Burger King locations.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's noticed, especially here in Hillsborough, there are tons of Burger Kings that have just disappeared over the past year, and so you actually kind of really touched on what is slowly becoming a theory of mine, which is my belief that the current government, the federal government, and certainly those on the left in Congress, want to keep this kind of bubble, this unemployment bubble, because what they're trying to do, as you also mentioned, is push up the wages, right? So they know, given the current numbers and given the projection for the midterm elections, they're probably not going to be able to pass a minimum wage raise bill, right? But if they can inflate the rate at which they have to pay people to get them in the door, I think, and again, it's a roundabout way of doing it, but if they can nationally get companies to raise wages, then they're kind of accomplishing the same thing, but it's not sustainable, because the minute you start pulling out, the eviction moratoriums, and the soon as things actually get back to normal, those businesses aren't going to be able to sustain those wages.
And Jonny, before we get into your very serious point, I'm still stuck on this chicken Raising
Yeah.
Cane's place? Do we have any locations in Florida?
Raising Cane's?
I don't think so.
I don't think we have them in Florida.
Okay.
I've seen them in Louisiana.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I'm partial to my Chick-fil-A, but I'm not above trying a new chicken place.
Yeah, they're in certain places.
Well, I believe
Maybe
in
the Panhandle,
Jesus.
maybe?
I believe in Jesus, so I will be going to Chick-fil-A.
I'm not betraying Chick-fil-A. I'm just saying I'll try.
Do you want them to sponsor you or not?
It's,
All right, I'll zip it.
Going back into the very serious question that you had, besides the fact that we're losing Burger Kings, we're also losing a lot of those minimum wage jobs to begin with. You no longer have 13, 14 like cashiers at supermarkets. Now you have 3 or 4, and then self cash out locations.
Right.
You're losing. They're squeezing that area because they got to find a way to make money and make business besides passing it on to the consumer.
Oh, look, I went to Target yesterday. There was one actual checkout counter that was open, and there were 6 self-checkout counters that were open. I mean, that's the point to where we're at with some of these. And this is a Target much in the heart of Tampa, very heavily trafficked. And again, they're realizing the problem is that people don't realize that when they're pressured into these situations, this is when they start trying new things and trying to figure out, well, how can we manage the amount of volume that we have with fewer people and fewer costs, right? So the long-term effect of this, I think, is also going to be horrendous for the people who do depend on those minimum wage jobs. But what's even more shocking to me is the fact that with the influx of people, right, that we had pre-COVID and now even post-COVID, the amount of people moving to Florida, that there's still so many jobs out there, tells you something's not right. There's something's just not right.
And you're going to see and economists are talking about like the snapback situation, where you had the entire government and the whole world kind of economy stop for 3-4 months. So you have now the build up, and then once things started to unlock a little bit, you had everyone running to Home Depot because they're all stuck at home, so they had to do something at home. Or all these new homes are being built in Florida. Well, they all need new furnishing and new equipment and new products. And so all of that build up demand is happening now, and the snapback is happening, where you have lumber that was a month and a half ago at $300 a plat. Now you have it at $1,200, $1,700. And you're going to see that ripple effect throughout the system. Some economists say it might take years for us to get it back to normality, and that's the problem. And so my issue with the additional economic assistance with the unemployment is that you're building a demographic of just people living off of the government dole. And for a while, it was low enough that we could deal with it and low enough that it wasn't as big of a problem. But when you have so many people still on it and they're not looking for jobs, they're not finding fulfillment in those areas, then it becomes a problem within society itself that people are getting upset that some people get more money than others. And some people are like, well, what's the point of me working if I can just live off the dole of the government?
Well, yeah, like think about it. Going back to that example that we saw like down in Sarasota with Ford's Garage. They're paying a $2,000 signing bonus for anyone to come in and work at their kitchen. Like I said, hell, I'll learn to make some fries and grill some chicken real quick, right? Or make some burgers.
I don't cook to begin with. That
So, well, I know you don't fit into the equation, but
give me a $10,000 signing bonus, and I might work a weekend.
But then, how does that not discourage the people that are already there, the guys that have been in there through the tough times, the people that have stuck it out through the shorter hours and, maybe some pay cuts, certainly hour cuts, right? And now saying, oh, now this new guy's going to get $2,000 just for walking in the door. You got to affect that again. The psyche, the effect that this is having psychologically on employees too is going to be disastrous for some businesses.
So the comment section has officially blown up. Thank you all for making comments. Kim is making the correction. It's 466,000 jobs with only 14K applicants. That's absolutely insane.
Wow.
Hector made a comment that there's been a run on ATMs at strip clubs because of the additional stimulus packages that were set up.
It.
No, that's seriously what he wrote, and it's from Hector. I'm very surprised. He did clean it up and say it was a Bay News 9 investigation article that was what found that. But again, I digress when it comes to that.
I mean, in a kind of a roundabout way, but, Busch Gardens, the theme parks, they're all busy. Mind you, there's still global travel restrictions in place. So this isn't like international. I mean, there are people out there that I think are enjoying quite a bit of money that they did not have previously. I mean, you go out, to the malls, if you go out to the theme parks, again, there's no shortage of people out there. Where was it? Mother's Day, Clearwater Beach was
crazy.
unbelievable. It was packed. Memorial Day weekend, I can guarantee you, is going to be nuts.
So you have the situation where people have the extra funds, they're ready to spend,
Right.
but then there aren't the workers to service that demand.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bad storm combination waiting to happen. It's
Well,
terrible.
and look, in a very kind of suburban light area here in Tampa Bay, up in the Apollo Beach area, I mean, my family had to wait, or they were told they were going to have to wait 90 minutes at a Chili's, of all places, just to get a table because they didn't have enough staff for the whole restaurant. I mean, they literally had such minimal staff that they could not take, tables for 90 minutes on a kind of a normal day. It wasn't even, anything special. They just happened to drop in. So there's going to be a lot of continued fallout from this. And we're talking about inflation. I mean, I think, what's really going to be interesting to see is as the unemployment programs start to dry up, what's going to happen here in Florida, and probably federally, and as housing prices increase, the moratorium ends, on evictions and foreclosures. I mean, there's going to be a bottom somewhere to all this.
And I would always
That's gonna
and
fall
I would
out.
agree that history would give us an idea where it's going to go. But we've all seen these last few months. No one has any idea what's going on
Right.
with the economy.
Sure.
The inflation should be through the roof. The dollar should be as weak as possible. Those are complete opposites. We might experience deflation come the end of summer when the snapback happens with raw resources and raw commodities. Again, it's because the government made a decision to shut down the world and then pump out trillions of dollars to its people. And so now the buying patterns are different of people, and that's going to have to work itself through the system. I am amazed to see what's happening, and I am amazed to see what will happen.
Look, to kind of wrap this up with a pretty bow in maybe the worst way possible, I mean, I think what this sends is a message to terrorist organizations out there that if you are able to acquire a biological weapon and deploy it internationally, I mean, you can literally shut down the entire globe. It's kind of scary and kind of like, Mission Impossible-esque to think, that something like that can happen. But that's basically what happened.
Right, it's no longer hypothetical.
Yeah.
We've seen it in real time. We've seen what can happen.
Exactly.
No, to your point, this is serious.
Well, shout out to everybody in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Hector, Fred, Kimberly, as always. Hello to our buddy Scott, who was on the show recently. Mr. Football. I'm going to start calling him Mr. Football.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Thank you to everybody for watching. And then for those of you who are catching us for the first time, don't forget you can catch the audio version of the podcast over at the Tech Overlords that we were just talking about at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon. And yes, those are all owned by two companies. So that's not Google, Apple, Audible.
2, 3.
Audible's owned by Amazon.
Yeah.
Spotify's not.
No, okay. All right, 3 companies then.
Yeah, be telling the truth of these people.
And then for the video version of the show, again, you can find it on Facebook and YouTube as you are watching now. We're going to go ahead and get slightly more local in today's topics, a very Florida-centric episode today. Dalton Grados, Berny, Jaques, and Anibal Cabrera joining me for today's show. Let's talk about our the orange man we hate to love and love to hate, Charlie Crist. We started talking about him in the last episode. Unfortunately, he's going to be, I think, probably in most episodes going forward for about the next year, as he has now officially entered the governor's race, prominently displaying his Crist for Governor sign on the back of a rainbow-colored Jeep through Ybor City this past weekend. Again, further encouraging the ongoing, I think, speculation as to why he hasn't come out of the closet yet. But that's that's on him. The shout out to the log cabin Republicans who had an amazing balcony at Zydeco. Great location, great business, amazing food. Been there a bunch of times, and a great spot for a parade like this. Seemed kind of light, right, Anibal? Kind of on the attendance? Seemed a little light to me.
Yeah, there was the Day Fest. So I think it was on purpose, done a little lightly. It wasn't that much pushover push for people to come out. Last time they had the parade, it was 70,000 people that were around the 7th Avenue in Ybor City is usually where Tampa does their Pride. This year they were expecting 10 to 20,000. So I think they probably exceeded that, but you can tell, because we're all Floridians, so we know Gasparilla. Right. And Gasparilla is ridiculous. Yeah. So when you see the tick down, you notice it, but it was still nicely intended. It was very, businesses enjoyed it because it wasn't overwhelming. Right. So we were able to do that. However, the log cabin Republicans made sure they had a front row seat to Charlie Crist's drive through the center of Ybor City. I really wish he would have just came out while he was driving through it.
That would have been a place to do it.
I would think it would have been a great place. And so when he did finally pass by the balcony of where the log cabins were, they made sure to show all of their DeSantis 2022 flags and American flags and properly booed him. We'll post the picture of his reaction looking up from his Jeep because he's very surprised because he had plenty of supporters there and a very large crowd. So they were excited that they were able to represent that community. We heard a lot of people from that community, and their stories are more about how it's more difficult to come out as a Republican conservative than it was to come out as gay or homosexual or lesbian. Sure. And that's a sad comment. That's a sad state of mind to really hear from those young Republicans and those conservatives, that it's so much more difficult to come out as a conservative. Well, and that community really needs to have different voices and different thoughts.
Well, and I would imagine because in some cases you're getting rejected by your family, your actual family, in some cases your community, your churches, that sort of thing. And then you're brought into this other community, the LGBTQ community, right? And you think, okay, we're good now, right? We're all here. But then all of a sudden, if you kind of voice some dissenting political opinion, now all of a sudden you're being ostracized by them. Mm-hmm. The very people that you thought were there to bring you into, normalcy and acceptance. And we've been hearing, again, like you said, more and more stories like that. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's creating a stronger foundation for those people who maybe live an LGBTQ lifestyle but align to the right politically. Yeah. And it's been great to see just over the past 2 years how that group has grown exponentially.
Well, this table understands this more than ever, that the YRs have been sometimes the front of that conversation of getting these people accepted in our community as the big tent of Republicans and conservatives. Tampa TBYR was one of the first organizations to go against DOMA. Was it against DOMA?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I remember that. We wrote the article. We wrote the pushback. And we got so much pushback, but we also got so much love for being that. Who cares? The government shouldn't care. The government should not be in anyone's bedroom. Correct. Conservative or liberal, it does not matter. The government should not have that kind of responsibility. The government shouldn't have the responsibility of issuing wedding licenses. That is absolutely ridiculous, which was originally a racist concept to stop black and white people from getting married. Like that, people forget that history.
Yeah, you're literally asking the government if you can marry someone. What business is it really of theirs?
And what I will say too, to your point that it's harder to come out as a conservative Republican these days, is a symptom of the sign of the times in this woke cancel culture warrior age that we're living in. Sure. That seems to only disadvantage conservatives. Yeah. Everybody can express their views except when you dare to step out to express your conservative viewpoints, and all of a sudden you're banished and you're put in a corner, never to be seen in polite society. And you're seeing a lot of people come out and they're getting backlash. Also, you're seeing it in a lot of minority communities, and folks are starting coming out with movement like Brexit, and things like that. And so you're seeing more people step out, and they're saying similar things. They're like, it's tough coming out as a conservative, and the backlash that we've been receiving is a lot. But I think a lot of people are getting more bold, especially in the conservative social media era, and they're seeing their strength in numbers that you can come from. And I think that's one of the benefits of conservatism, where we don't, emphasize the identity politics so much as the left. That literally you could come from any kind of background and you can share the values, conservative values, and contribute to the conservative movement. And the left doesn't like that because they have a narrative that if you look a certain way, You come from a certain community, you're not supposed to think a certain way,
Right.
and they want to cancel you.
Well, and sadly, as far as we have come, as young as a country as we have, on issues like race and lifestyle, right? You see that in some ways we're almost being anchored by, right, dragged by the fact that now, if you meet certain, certain demographics, like, forget it, you're being ostracized, and no offense to my buddy Dalton here, but it's like race, and then lifestyle, and then political affiliation, and I think if you're not checking off those 3 boxes nowadays for some organizations and some companies, forget it, you're not getting in the door. Not to mention all the social, criticism that comes along with it.
I will say this, the comment section is making some corrections. Fred is saying that actually TBR was in 2005, argued for FFYR to change the platform to no longer disenfranchise members that were the LGBTQ community. So that was in 2005. And Fluno is saying that all the heads of every member in East County is exploding because of this conversation.
Yeah, well, but again, hardcore ideology on either side politically is not good. It's not good for our country. It's not good politically. It's not it's not good political strategy, to ostracize certain people, from your organization simply because you don't agree with, again, their lifestyle, their race, their way of life. And it's funny because some of those same people, who again may take issue with this conversation, come election season, they scratch their heads and they wonder, man, I wonder why they won't vote for us. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, think about all the other stuff you said for the past year, and think about the reasons why you won't elect them to leadership roles, why you won't accept them into your group, why you won't even socialize with them. One of the things that, again, I think, YRs have done very successfully now for the past 10, 20 years has been going into places where we're typically not seen as welcome, or maybe not perceived as welcome, whether it be in the Black community, whether it be in the gay community, whether it be, again, in some liberal corners, because I think that shows that, our politics, again, crosses all that.
Correct.
We're not there to see to it that any one particular race or gender or nationality, outperforms the other. And oftentimes, when you start having like genuine productive conversations with people about where the Republican actually stands on issues, you realize that they start to turn the corner once they truly understand, without the media narrative, without the social narrative of what the Republican Party actually stands for.
I mean, and we can even step into one more arena, and that's religion. Some of the best conservatives I know are of the Jewish faith, of the Hindu faith. A huge population of the Hindu faith is very conservative, and to the point to where even Muslims and some other Sikhs are very much conservative, and that makes some conservatives a little apprehensive.
Sure.
And we have to get over that and understand that the goal is to elect Republicans. The goal is to push the conservative movement. The goal is to make sure that we have a limited government and that all are created equal under God, even if you don't believe in it. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to start focusing on that and just shoot ourselves in the foot because some Republicans were at the Pride March makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense.
No, on the contrary, like, we should be there not only having a balcony like the log cabin Republicans did, and again, through yourself and and other things that we've done, we try to be supportive of that organization,
Correct.
But in fact, we should be out there registering people to vote,
Which we
and
did.
we should be out there handing leaflets out as to why they should vote Republican.
Mm-hmm. As a conservative activist, I've often seen myself as a conservative missionary. Going into the different corners of the world in our country to convert and win, souls. Just kidding. Just win hearts and minds to the conservative cause.
You're not that far off. You're not that far off.
And I remember, I went and I spoke with a friend of mine who's on the left, but I spoke at Berkeley as a conservative. And a lot of the students, I got to tell you, came to me afterwards and they said, I don't agree with you. And they were throwing some hardballs at me during Q&A, but a lot of them came up after me. They said, I appreciate you still coming here because oftentimes we don't get to hear from a conservative because typically it's a higher profile person.
And
coming to
sometimes
campus.
the schools themselves
They
will
get shut
prohibit
down.
it.
Yeah. The schools prohibit them. They don't even get the benefit of hearing from a Shapiro or you name it, who will come to the campus. So I had to come in stealth. No one knows Berny Jaques. So they heard a little bit of the message. Yeah. Go to bernieforflorida.com. But I'm telling you, I mean, people appreciate it, getting a different perspective. And we have to go to all corners, to spread the good news of conservatism.
Yeah, I read something that was like, college students, it's not that they disagree with conservative values, it's that they're not hearing conservative values.
They're not exposed to it
So,
at all.
but I would like to say I am a conservative, and I will be coming out as transgender very soon. You got to do something to get ahead. Everyone wants Caitlyn Jenner to be governor. At least she's not a white male.
Hey, it works in Florida. It works in California. Would it work in like Citrus County? No, but it works in California because at the end of the day, and we've all had these conversations. That would a New Jersey Republican get elected in Tampa or in Florida? No, it's not going to happen. But a New Jersey Republican will get elected in New Jersey, and that's what matters. And so us doing a litmus test on either side causes so many more problems. In the Republican Party, we do a great job destroying ourselves because of this litmus test. Because you don't follow these protocols is automatically destructive of the Republican Party.
Well, and the irony is that they all they hold up Reagan as the standard, right? When Reagan was the biggest advocate for being the big tent party, right? And being welcoming to all. And yet time and time again, some of these people who continue to ostracize others from the party are the ones who try to espouse Reagan's values, well, when they're typically the ones farthest from representing what he actually stood for as a Republican. And so, again, when I look at why I officially became a Republican, you go back to your Reagans and even going further back, and talking about, being an abolitionist party, and being inclusive of, the first black, congressmen, and leaders in this community politically were of the Republican Party and were of minorities, of a minority background. So
the comment section is also going in a good direction. I like it. People are making comments about the community, the LGBT community. They're talking about Log Cabin. They're talking how much we need to focus on them. We need to focus on younger people getting into the party. I will say Fred has a very long post, which I also will not read out loud. However, the ending is phenomenal. And it says that we are more than a tent. We are an open window that frees the soul. And I agree with you.
Yeah, I love it. That's beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again to everybody in the comments section, everybody watching The Yard Sign, the most important relevant podcast in politics. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this episode so that we can continue to reach more people as we certainly get closer to our midterm elections. We're going to go ahead and now switch gears significantly as we want to take full advantage of our financial expert here. It's the Yard Sign's financial expert, Dalton Grados, who's going to talk to us about Rollercoaster crypto. Obviously, a lot of people are putting this on Elon. Some people are not. They're just saying, hey, this is kind of the way, that this cryptocurrency thing is going to work for the time being, until it really kind of finds its roots and finds its foundation. What's kind of your opinion on some of the flexibility, some of the variability that there's been lately in that market?
Well, crypto, it's important to remember, is a very new asset class still. And
allegedly.
so it always...
It's an asset class. See, he didn't say it's an actual currency. It's an asset class.
Yeah.
Allegedly also.
That's a good distinction. All right, go ahead.
But so it's always traded very with a lot of volatility.
Right.
So I track, and part of my trading, I trade derivatives, specifically index options. So I'm a little bit out of the crypto market, but I pay attention to it. But one thing I pay attention to is price action in standard deviations. So like you have a standard deviation chart, it's like 70% of the time it stays within one standard deviation, 95% of the time the price stays within two standard deviations. Cryptocurrencies regularly move like more than two standard deviations. So it's always been a very volatile market. When you have this sort of crash that we're seeing, essentially almost like half the price from its all-time highs, it's because you're having, what's affecting it more is you have a lot of scared money in it. And then you also have a lot of those inexperienced investors that once it goes below a certain point, if they're on margin, then they're getting margin called, which means they have to add to their position if they want to keep it or liquidate it. And so then it drops even further. And so that's why you see much more wild swings like this. Right. It's because you have people that are scared that are pulling out, and then you have people that are getting penalized and causing it to drop further. So.
We talked a little bit about this. I think it was in our last episode where we were kind of breaking down, really, because we have Ethereum and Bitcoin and Dogecoin and and we're going to continue to see iterations of cryptocurrency. Again, how likely is it that Bitcoin, let's say, is still around in 5 years, or that it may be and end up being like the cryptocurrency? Right. Because I'm guessing at some point, as they say in Highlander, there can only be one.
Yeah. Well, I think now I know there's people that are really into like the whole dynamics behind all of the crypto, or the real like science and algorithms stuff behind it.
Yeah.
I'm not too educated on that, but I will say that as an investor, I do see value in Bitcoin and Ethereum because those are the most established cryptocurrencies, and long term, people are holding them. And all the financial mentors that I listen to are saying if you want to have safe money long term, gold, silver, which has been a classical case, people have held gold and silver forever,
right. And
cryptocurrencies, mainly Bitcoin and Ethereum, because those are the established ones. All of the other ones that are coming out, there's so many ridiculous ones.
Yeah.
Doge, and there's one,
Tron.
CUM Rocket, if you want to spell that out.
Geez.
But you don't, like, that's all pure right. Nonsense almost. But there's a lot of people that are valuing it over the long term as a hedge against inflation and devaluing of the regular currencies that we use.
Which is technically not a legitimate investment in economic theory because it hasn't been tested yet.
Right.
So I think that's where people just need to be very careful. Again, you want to put 3, 5, 8% of your portfolio into crypto, by all means. That makes sense. It's a good basket to go buy, but I wouldn't suggest that. Looking at the majority of, I think there's like almost 1,000 coins now that you can purchase. It's absolutely insane. Majority of them are still down on their 7-day moving average. Some of them have increased by 10% lately. Bitcoin is back. It's hovering almost to 40,000 again. What was the other one? The one that you talked about? Ethereum is almost at $2,700. So I mean, things are moving around. Bitcoin is back down to what was Dogecoin?
Ethereum's been around about 5 years, 3 to 5 years.
It was one of the big secondary ones. So and we've had this conversation. I like
along with Bitcoin.
I like the technology behind it. I think that's revolutionary. I don't like it being classified as an asset because that's very. At the moment you do that, they're going to get taxed out the yin yang for it because of it. And to have the argument that it's used,
which they're already starting to scratch at that.
Yes, you saw that this weekend that they did that, and especially because I think it's more because of Elon Musk. And the way that he's been playing the market and saying like, oh, it's not real, you should go for this and that. So it's funny how that's working.
Well, and he can play around because again, there's no SEC regulations there to stop him.
Right, and that's the one thing that does change the whole game is regulation of cryptocurrencies. However, the big people that are like really nerds about cryptocurrency will tell you that it's like because of the nature of it, it's like literally impossible to actually have regulation around it. Like
you don't know the government, but the United States, they will figure, and that's the problem. So like the question is, will the government getting involved, will it hurt it or help it? I think it hurts it because it loses that veneer of being decentralized. Because the moment the government gets involved, it becomes centralized. And that's why that's what I'm saying. Like I have no idea where it's going to go, but I don't think it's going to go as high as people are. Like some people are saying $500,000 per coin. I don't think that's the case. But if you're going to hold it if you're going to play in this system, just make sure your whole portfolio is not full of it.
I'm just amazed by the amount of people, just everyday people who have gotten involved and into investing because of this. phenomenon.
yeah,
I mean,
well-
I was home for Mother's Day, and I'm having dinner with my mom, and she tells me she's following Doge. And I was like, wait, what's happening here? What is this? Is this real life? And she had the Robinhood app and everything showing me. I'm like, what is happening? I mean, yeah, so it's
it's
exploding
funny.
out there.
I was watching a podcast and it was so interesting. I hadn't thought of this before, but he was talking about how the younger generations now, because of this, and they're being all exposed to it. Some kids as young as 12 and 13 are investing in this stuff, even though it's technically they shouldn't have an account. But they're saying their perception, like this guy it was George Gammon, who's a great economic guy, and he was saying, like, growing up, when I thought of how to build a wealthy life, what came to my mind, because of what I'd been taught and what I'd seen around me, is to build a business and have a service or a product or something, and grow it big and have a team, and then you create riches. And he's like, now the younger generation is like, how to get riches is like, go all in on some coin, and because people have made 20,000% returns, and so it's.
But then you're also going to have the other side of that, and you're going to have people lose everything, and they're going to lose their mortgage, and they're going to lose all that because they got in it on the wrong time. Because no matter what, someone eventually is going to have to catch the knife, and that knife is going to slice hard. So all of this stimmy money that people are playing with, which is what I think a lot of it is about, is stimmy money. That people have extra funds. I mean, if you're going to use Robinhood, whatever, they stopped trading. I have a huge problem with Robinhood because the way they worked out with GameStop and how you were able to sell, but you weren't able to buy anymore.
I'll tell my mom then. Delete Robinhood. It was bad. All
And so there's others to use it. It's just the manipulation. And if we're going to do an investigation, we should definitely do an investigation on what on earth would happen with Robinhood.
No, look, I like it. I've been on Robinhood, I think, for a few years now, and I mean, really, at the foundation of all this is how these investment apps have made it so easy to, even if it's just to play around in, throw $100, $500 in, and just to see what happens. Exactly. I did it.
The market isn't a stock market. The market is not a casino. Dalton knows this. The average trader only does it, I think, 3 to 5 trades like a week or so, like something not as crazy.
Right.
Whereas now you can see it's like 10 to 20 to 30 trades a day. And these are people that this is not their day job. Like, this is going to become a problem.
Yeah, but we've been seeing this has been around now for years with your day traders.
Yeah, but that was different because it doesn't feed into like a casino atmosphere. Whereas now there's reports that are talking about how these app developers are purposely trying to make it feel like it's a casino, like you're gambling instead of investing, long-term investing. So I think that's something that the FCC is really going to have to talk into. And the moment that you hear like the coin sound with Robinhood, then it's stimulating that part of your brain that you want to put more money in because you might win. And then there's going to be a crash, and then half a generation's wiped out.
Yeah, well, most of the stocks that I've, thrown a little bit of money at through Robinhood have actually performed really well, to the extent that had I thrown a lot more money at them, I'd be doing all right. It's, but I think it's also, you're right. It's not a retirement, strategy, right? But it's also not gambling. You got to go in there and realize that there are much more severe consequences, I think, than if you were to go and spend $500 at the casino. At some point you run out of money and you got to walk out the door. Whereas with this, we saw, especially with what happened with some of this cryptocurrency trading, was that people were spending money they didn't have.
Yeah.
that they couldn't, that they couldn't back up. And that was the big issue, and why Robinhood kind of freaked out, because you had people making bets, really, making investments that they couldn't fund.
Yeah. Personal responsibility is a huge thing. Discipline is a huge thing in order to last. As far as a trader, now a long-term investor, you can just buy and hold and just have discipline there. I think a lot more people can be a long-term investor than can be a trader. But and unfortunately, most of the apps, specifically, the apps that are more gamified, attract a younger audience that don't really know
But
what they're
it's only
doing,
going to get
so-
worse. I mean, there's
But
you
that's
know,
why we have consumer protection laws,
And I don't-
That's why we.
yeah.
I think that is, again, it needs to be talked about. That the more they game it and make it feel like it's a casino, when you're really buying stocks and bonds, which are very serious, those need to be cracked down.
But
And
see,
I don't know how that's going to play out. I have no idea, but I know that's going to become a problem.
But see, it's only going to get, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but the problem's only going to get worse because it's only going to get easier. I mean, there's actually a local startup here, shout out to them, but it's called Griffin. Okay, and if you want to look it up, it's GRIFIN. Okay, but basically, when you open an account with them, and you get all your stuff set up, they will, through your purchases. All right, so the stuff that you spend your money on every day, Target, Starbucks, whatever it is you're spending money on, if they are a publicly traded company, it will actually take whatever amount of money that you wish to kind of contribute to that app, a month or whatever, and buy stocks in the brands that you support.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
So
It's very
Yeah.
deceiving, but interesting at the same time.
deceiving how?
It's deceiving that, so if I buy something from Nike, it'll buy a Nike brand, correct? Or it'll buy a Nike
Yeah, it'll
stock.
buy a Nike stock,
So
right?
then, does that work with, you know what? I'm not even going to finish this. I just saw where it was going. Dude, that's not going to get on camera. We'll talk about this offline.
Yeah.
I will say the comment section has been really fun on this one.
Yeah.
That dividend, if you can play the dividend play, and Dalton will agree with me, those dividend stocks that pay out every single quarter or every single year is a great play. That's really fun. Fred and Hector are, of course, fighting in the comment section, so that's nothing new. But I think a lot of people are on the notion that, yes, we're going to have it for a while, the crypto conversation, until it levels out. And I agree with it. It's an emerging market.
Yeah.
It's going to have its wildness. I think the easy money in crypto that could be made has been made.
Well, I think it's interesting how governments and local governmental entities are engaging with cryptos. I think as a city of Miami, employees can elect to be paid in crypto and even I think pay bills, in crypto.
Yeah.
The mayor down there, Francis Suarez, seems to be very on the cutting edge of that, and I've been watching some of his stuff, but it seems like, just seeing how...
But the problem is that if you paid a $500 utility bill, let's say, obviously that's a very steep utility bill, but if you paid a $500 utility bill and you paid it a month ago, okay, now that crypto that you paid that utility bill with is now only worth $250. So the city, in fact, is actually losing money in that instance. And who knows, maybe long term, right?
Yeah.
When you start to do the math 5-10 years down the road,
It might be different.
the value
Yeah.
might continue to increase. But, we're starting to see some, to your point, and you're right. I mean, it's interesting to see that people are starting to kind of tip to their toes in the water, in terms of taking it as a currency, but we're also in the same token seeing brands kind of say, hold on a second, wait, because of the volatility, and saying we don't want to diminish the value of our revenue,
Yeah.
because if this coin that we're taking for, let's say it's worth $100 today, if it's worth $50 tomorrow, well, now we just kind of took money out of our own bank account without even realizing it.
And that's why I really much am hesitant to call it an asset. Gold is an asset. You can purchase gold. It can be used. Our cell phones and technology have gold in them, so it's an actual physical asset.
Right.
On stocks, it can be traded on. You can actually do that. Earth, like buying land, that's an asset. I see more of it as a liability and in a speculative market. I give it to where it's a speculative market. I don't give it to it as an asset. And when Warren Buffett says it isn't an asset, then it isn't an asset.
Well, real quick, because I wanted to kind of get your take on, again, what's kind of happening in a really weird way. For instance, Florida being as open as it is, other states not being so open. What effect do you think that's going to have on the national economy? Because, again, there's now this kind of very unlevel playing field, in terms of retailers, small businesses, and what effect do you think that's going to have, be it on the overall economy or the stock market, the fact that even among the 50 states within the United States, we're not all on the same page right now.
Yeah. I know from a stock market perspective, it's kind of upside down. The stock market actually goes up when there's more lockdown news or lack of reopening news, I should say. because it means that the Fed won't taper their purchases of bonds, and the stock market takes a little tumble whenever there is more, positive jobs news and things like that, because it means the Fed might taper. So it's kind of upside down in the stock market.
Right, it decoupled a while ago. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Because we saw that almost instantly. We saw it almost instantly, like as soon as coronavirus hit. The economy like freaked out for like a second, and then it was booming.
Yeah.
And then nobody could understand why the stock market was booming when basically the whole world, the entire globe had shut down.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna have to catch up to the fact. Like, I did a video the other day where it was like, is the U.S. economy really recovering? I looked at a number of things. The main thing was the U.S. money velocity, which is the rate at which a dollar moves hands, is still at like all-time lows. And then our trade deficit increased from 50 to around 74%. So about a 50% increase in our trade deficit. And so those things together, like that's really doesn't say much for the U.S. like as an economy. And if I were to bet on, like, if the U.S. was a stock, would I invest in it, or would I invest in
I was going
to push back.
But
this is the beauty of the economy, that you can have two sides of a coin and it still be a coin.
Yeah,
so
but
like
it decreased
with the trade deficit. It's because of we are purchasing more things from outside the country
than we are producing.
Than we were producing, which happens in a mature first world nation. And then when it comes to the money supply, the reason why that number is the way it is because there's like $4 trillion more dollars floating around the economy, and so then the average is reducing even further. So like the numbers are being, and again, I would always agree. And when Joe's here, when Joe Wicker's here, I agree. Hyperinflation should be happening right now. We should be having horrible situations, but it's not, because we've never had a situation where the government has completely shut everything down and then just reopened it. And so now we just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, we're also more of a global economy, more than we've ever been when you're talking about a global economic crisis like this one. And so that's another factor. It's like, obviously, if you're talking about back, during the Great Depression or World War II or whatever you want to point to, as kind of a global crisis, we were very independent, in terms of, our economy, in terms of we were actually not only producing a lot of our own goods, but we were consuming a lot of our own goods.
Right.
That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And so, again, that probably lends to a lot of this weird dynamic we have.
I think 70% of all dollars being used right now are being purchased for goods, durable goods, and not services. Because again, people are not comfortable getting services done at the moment because it's the interaction with individuals. When that normality comes back into play, then you'll see the shift from dollars of products back to services. But again, that's the dilemma. So now you're going to have Home Depot purchasing all the supplies, thinking that we're going to go on for a while. And what's probably going to happen is by end of summer or end of this year, you'll have a drop off on the demand for products and an increase for supply for services. And again, this is what throws it off. And I think it's going to be a ripple effect for maybe a few years. It's interesting. And what Dalton is saying is correct. All of that is right.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying could be seen as right. Again, the economics are just playing.
Well, and while I think for now a lot of the migration that's happening to Florida, Texas, some of the more open states, is due directly to lockdowns and restrictions in other states.
Definitely.
What I think is going to happen is I think it's going to continue to snowball because those economies, in those states are going to continue to lag, and so people are, inevitably there's going to be, again, migration to where the economy is prospering, and so as more jobs move here, as more businesses are created here, and more businesses migrate and leave those other states, we're going to see a big disparity, where some of these states are going to see these kind of more, not mass migration numbers, but we're seeing big migration numbers out of states like, especially over on the western side of the country, in California and Colorado and Washington,
I've never met
Oregon.
so many people from Seattle and Portland. I've all my life never meeting these people.
Yeah,
all of a sudden, they're all around
right.
Florida. I just hope they remember why they fled.
Right.
Voting the same way, right?
Well, I mean, Lindsay got caught off by somebody with a California plate, and actually,
Streets are getting worse.
And I'd never seen a Washington State license plate. state until this year. You know, I mean, other than having been in Washington, you know, but to actually see a Washington state license plate, I mean, it's almost like when you see like a Hawaii license plate or a Alaska license plate, it's like really weird, you know, but you can usually chalk those up to a member of the military or something, you know, but I just, you know, I think our good friend EJ Otero was actually counting the other day, you know, all of the out-of-state license plates, you know, on just kind of like an afternoon driving around, and I think he almost hit like 200.
Wow.
You know, just like on an average drive.
He's also retired, so he has the time to do it.
He's also very awesome.
He's also very
I love
awesome.
EJ.
I apologize for
The
making
Colonel.
that comment. The Colonel has done great things for this country.
Absolutely.
So, you know, looking at, just to kind of wrap it up, looking at what's happening in the stock market, right? And we're seeing the, just not only here in Florida, because it is kind of happening nationally, but mostly here in Florida, we're seeing this run on housing, right? So, you know, inventory is not able to keep up. We're seeing the cost of construction also, though, on the incline, you know. So, again, at some point, one of those two has to give.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen with the housing industry?
I actually saw an interesting take that was saying that we should have a significant correction in the housing market because it's so hyperinflated and it's been sort of manufactured by the Fed buying mortgage-backed securities. And so it's kind of been like artificially created a little bit. And so so that would be nice to see. That's kind of my, you know, and the, you know, I follow a lot of smart people, so the person I trust his opinion. But that would be nice to see. That's kind of like what I would hope for is a correction in the housing market. A lot of people that are in real estate.
Because both of those things happening at the same time is not sustainable.
Right.
I mean, you know, at some point, either the cost of construction has to give, or the housing prices have to give.
Well, that's the thing, and prices can't just go straight up forever. That's what people are finding out with crypto, right? Yeah. And so it happens with everything else. There's an overshoot, and then there's a correction. And that's what I found usually with anything. Even if you watch stock charts on a daily basis, or if you just watch overall markets, there's usually things overshoot in one direction or the other, and then they correct.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I think could happen.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, it's The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Special thanks to my guests today, Dalton Grados, Berny, Jaques, and, as always, Anibal, David Cabrera. We're going to wrap up the show, as we always do, with the one story that we didn't get to today that you are watching very closely, or that certainly got your interest over the past week. We'll kick it off, as we usually do, with Mr. Anibal, David Cabrera. What's your story?
So I have two. One is the peace ceasefire in Israel, between Israel and Palestine, and to see how that's going to work out. Both of them, I think, got exactly what they wanted. Hamas will
Money from Biden?
Basically. and weapons from Biden.
Yeah.
So Hamas is probably going to win the general election that's going to happen in the West Bank in the next month or two. And then when it comes to Israel, they've had 5 elections with unable to form a government. So I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is probably going to win his election as well. So we're just going to see both sides do exactly what they wanted to do, which is why they were so upset
Weren't
about it.
they just trying to throw him in jail?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
But it's like Russia. You're never going to get it happen. And the other one I would say is Aung San Suu Kyi actually showed up in court in Myanmar. So that was a new development in the struggle of that country figuring out what to do with a military dictatorship.
Well, isn't there's actually some movement now, even within the UN, at looking into the Uyghur situation in China?
That is movement, but not really. It's in a subcommittee, and China is on the Security Council, and they're going to veto whatever comes out of there. So nothing's going to happen.
Mr. Jaques, local, national, what's a story you're watching that we didn't get to talk about today?
Sure thing. We talked a lot about our great governor, Ron DeSantis, and some of the things that he's doing when it comes to, the extra unemployment payments and taking on big tech. But one of the other things that he's been very vocal and outspoken about is taking on this thing known as critical race theory that a lot of these leftists are trying to push into our schools. And he's come out very strongly and said, we're not going to accept that in the state of Florida. They may call it different names and still try to sneak it in there, but he's going to be very vigilant and trying to make sure that they don't poison our children with that stuff. It's really a Marxist play to divide, make kids hate each other just on the basis of the color of their skin for no other reason. What? Everything we fought against, right? The civil rights era, we're bringing back and training kids to look at the prism of race and treating people differently based on how they look. And it's one of those things that when I get to the State House, I'm going to be a strong ally with the governor on to make sure that we have real education and not this liberal indoctrination in our schools.
No, look, and in all fairness, I mean, going back to, and I went to, for elementary and middle school, I went to inner city schools. And even then, I certainly think we do need to revisit how we teach American history. And again, I think Republicans would all agree that we need to make sure that we're not only teaching American history, but American government, right? And make sure that we create a strong foundation. But there is so much out there that we never get taught, and that that it's completely overlooked, and it's like, and so when the black community comes out and says, well, so much of our history is ignored, and you have to say that they're right. I mean, when you look at some of the contributions, that have made at every level of this country, not only from civil rights all the way up to technology and science, and there's so much that's left out of our American history and the teachings of it. I do think in some cases, we were having an off-air conversation about education last week, when we had our dinner after the show, that there does need to be a modernization of our curriculum in the United States.
Yeah, and it needs to be done in the appropriate way, and not in a way to divide. To your point, a lot of accomplishments that happen in history from Black Americans actually speak to the greatness of this country. It's some of the things that were able to be accomplished at a time where there was so much adversity, when there was so much in their faces, and that so much was accomplished. It actually shows the testament to a great country we live in and to where we are now, that we can celebrate where we were and to where we are now, and to celebrate this country for what it is, and not to have this warped view to make people feel angry. And instead very optimistic and hopeful about a brighter future.
Well, and again, not to take away from the pride that there might be for President Obama and a Kamala Harris and those things among the Black community, but so few is known about those who were elected to Congress in the earliest days of this country, and the contributions and the grounds that were broken way back then, that have been just driven into obscurity.
Right. I mean, several Black Republican congressmen back in the 1870s, are serving in the 1800s. And they were Republican Blacks,
while slavery was still very much alive.
A couple from Florida, during the Reconstruction era. And so you talk about in very deep South states and things that they were able to advance. But you don't hear about these things. A lot of it, I think, is it doesn't fit a narrative. And it's a narrative of empowerment and not one of victimization.
Right.
And so, and that really matters in the mind of a young person, and the way they're being taught. Because if you go around thinking you're a victim just because of the way you look, you're going to be holding yourself back. You're going to prevent yourself from trying different things because you think the chips are stacked against you. And that really, really does damage to your future. We need to be teaching youth that, your future is bright, and your past, there's a lot to be proud of, and a lot was accomplished as well here in the United States.
Right. And so, all right, well, awesome. That's a great one. Critical race theory, certainly, something I think, we'll probably be talking about really soon here, given that it is such a front of mind topic, and we are seeing it being challenged in other states. And it's something that if you don't stop this now, forget it. It's going to be impossible to get rid of it down the road. Dalton.
That was amazing, and everyone needs to support Berny for state representative. I just have something that I thought was funny, which was that the Netflix CEO donated $3 million to help Gavin Newsom from being recalled, and I was just, the first thought was, of course, Netflix would want more lockdowns.
Oh yeah.
So it's an investment,
Right.
But yeah, that's all I have.
But look, hey, that's politics. I mean, I'm sure it's favored Netflix, with all the lockdowns and everything that's happened, and certainly, especially now that they've got so much competition in the game. It's that's an interesting space that I love to seeing. Now there's Paramount Network and then the Discovery Network, and they're all going onto streaming platforms. I love the meme that's been out there now for a little bit saying that, man, somebody really smart is going to come and grab all these streaming services and put them together and call it cable. So the story I've been watching and find really fascinating has been the dissent among the Japanese of the Olympics coming. Of course, they were postponed because of COVID, so we're going to be playing the 2020 Olympics in 2022, I think, or 21. Is it this year or next year that they're going to?
2020 will be played this year.
No, because they skipped it.
2022 is the Winter Olympics, so it's in a completely different place, China.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Is it this summer?
2020 is
the 2020 Olympics
is this summer.
Or be right. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. 2022 is
winter, right?
Is winter.
Okay, yeah. I was just clarifying my timeline. So, because we're in 2021, so we're playing the 2020 Olympics in 2021. Anyways, so the Japanese are protesting. Which they're not going to win. I mean, the Olympics are going to happen. There's too much bribery and too much, money involved. It was because of not only because of COVID, they're afraid of having a surge in COVID come back to Japan, but also because of the environmental impact, that the Olympics are going to have on Japan. And again, I wonder if this is going to be maybe the beginning of a turning of the tide to where some of these countries will be like, maybe we don't want to host the Olympics.
It's too much money.
It is a lot of money.
It's too much money. If we're willing to do the World Cup, if we're willing to do the leagues, even the Super Bowl, there's too much money.
But we're seeing more and more the disastrous stories of
but that's because you allow those countries that did it to lie about their books, Greece, and allow them to be able to do it. Brazil lied about their books as well.
Yeah.
And so again, the purpose of the Olympics is to showcase your country, and which China did very well, even though they went into like $16 billion. But that's what they want to do. It's almost like a promotion for it. Yeah. Now I think what's going to happen is that more wealthier countries are going to be hosting. The U.S. is going to host in California. We have France hosting. So those kind of things. And now I feel it's probably might be like 5 cities around the world that will host and just rotate. I think that's what it's going to be like.
Yeah, well, because again, I mean, few countries even have the infrastructure like that the United States has, where honestly any of our bigger states could host an Olympics or a World Cup. I mean, easily. And so again, but props to the Japanese, for standing up, because again, should they have concerns? I think
what happened last time the Japanese stood up?
So, oh jeez. On that note, thank you so much to everybody for watching The Yard Sign. Don't forget, you can catch the audio version of our podcast on the Tech Overlords over at Apple, Google, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon. You can also catch the video version on Facebook and YouTube. On behalf of my guests, Dalton, Grados, Berny, Jaques, and Anibal, David Cabrera, I'm Jonny Torres. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here next Monday. Good night, everybody.